All right, friends. Today it is week 12. Can you guys believe we are already that far? That's crazy. We only have a couple more weeks left. So here we're doing validations. We're going to talk about that. And then maybe we'll talk about regex on Thursday, um, or Wednesday, sorry. And then next week we're talking about login and registration. This is where we're going to talk about hashing passwords, kind of fully creating a login, uh, portion of our project. Um, and then lastly, we will be kind of doing a belt review. So we'll be doing other things. Maybe I'll show you mini to mini, but I'll kind of make sure that you know everything and we walk through probably these last two classes. We're just going to walk through everything we did for our project. So that way, um, you guys are really prepped and ready. And then we'll do a little bit of a what to expect on the belt exam on this Wednesday. And then your belt exam window will open, which is crazy. And then you guys will have 1 week, kind of one full week to work on it. You get up to 3 chances. Again, if you wait until the last day, then you've sort of foregoing. You have up to 3, but you have to start by Tuesday because it's due, or I guess you can start Wednesday, but it's due end of day Wednesday, 11:59 p.m. Wednesday. So that's what we'll be doing. These ones we might talk about. I'll kind of leave that up to you guys. We can get to this process in a bit, but we can say, like, do we want to work with APIs? That's a really popular thing. And usually what I do with students, just to show you how we can interact and use APIs, because that's something that you guys don't have a ton of practice with, but we want to make sure you have that. So we'll probably do that. And then we'll have our last class on the 27th. And then the following stack, you will go to projects and algorithms. So it's coming up quick. Today, what we're doing is we're going to talk about just basic form validation, making sure that, the data that we're getting is protected and it's not really pinging our database, and we're not sort of making calls to our database when, we're not given the correct information. So that's what we're going to do there. We're going to talk about then if there is an error, how do we show that? So we're going to introduce something called Flash for you guys. And then again, maybe I'll do some sort of like regex, like a custom validation that we can do on Wednesday, or we can do an algorithm, whatever you guys choose. I'll ask you at the end of this class. We can go from there. Cool. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. Make sure you're doing your discussion questions. Make sure you do your core assignments. If we look at this week is pretty light. You got cookie orders with validation. And then next week, you just have login and registration and then recipes. So really 3 for these next 3 weeks. Recipes is a big one. So this is kind of you want to make sure you do recipes before you do the exam. It's really similar. And it's quite a few things. So make sure you're getting a head start if you can on this. Cool. Just again to walk through what we've done so far, we've built a belt app. Let's just actually go ahead. I'm gonna get this started, and then I'm gonna say Python server. Cool. So let's go to that localhost 5000. Cool. So we created our movie creator application, where we can create a new user if we wanted. We can create a new movie, and we can show all users. So we can get all users. And if I wanted to look at each user, we did a join where we can also look at the movies that were created by this user. Now, this doesn't look great. We can look at this in format a little bit later. That'll kind of be a week 14 thing that we do. But we have created a join where we can add those together. So we're getting not only our users, but also all of our movie information. So what we want to do is we are going to handle validations. Now, when we come, let's say here to create new user, right now, what it does is it asks for some information, and then I hit create user. And again, I like to show you guys what's happening. So let's kind of go there. Let's go in my templates. I've got a user form. Here's my creating one user. So once I press this create user button, What it does is it comes here. This is my form, goes to this user create. So let's go to my controller, users, and it's looking for users create. It's methods post. We grab the data. We say .save. So once it gets here, right, then we go into my user model. We run the .save, which is just inserting into. Cool. We're good to go there. And then once it runs .save, it is redirecting back to our base route, which is our index.html, which is this one right here. Or, sorry. This one right here. Now, something that's really important is we're not doing anything to protect our database at the moment, right? We're not doing any sort of prevention to make sure, okay, the data that they're giving us is good, it's valid, and we can send it to our database. We're just kind of free flowing and letting everything be sent. Now, that's not something we typically want to do because what will often happen is we will pay. So with a lot of these databases, like MongoDB, for example, we'll set it up so you have X amount of queries or X amount of pings to the database, and then anything after that, you know, you can kind of pay for those, or it costs per query, you know, pennies on the dollar, but it costs per query. That's kind of how the cloud is also set up. So we want to prevent our database from having bad data. So we want to make sure that, okay, nope, we want to have good data. And then secondly, we want to say, hey, if somebody's going to give us a bad form, maybe they don't give us all the information or the password doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Well, we want to prevent that from even querying and hitting my database. I want to make sure it's only good, you know, passing information that then goes to my database, right? I'm happy to pay for it only if it's good, but not if somebody forgets to put a password or puts a 2-letter password or something of that nature. So that's where validations come in. Right? Validations is a way that we can validate, kind of makes sense, validate our information before we even send it to our database. Now, it's fairly simple to implement, and so we're gonna do that. We're gonna implement it, but it is here on the platform, just under basic form validation. This pattern validation, this is what we call regex. So basically, we can say, hey, this needs to follow a certain pattern. You know, a password has to have, you know, characters and numbers and letters, and it can't have X amount of characters, whatever. So it's called regex. This is what I was saying we'll do on Wednesday, but it's not super hard to implement. So feel free if you want to move forward with that. But we're just going to do a basic form validation. Now, where we do this is, first and foremost, we set up this as just another tool, another attribute, another functionality of my user class. So what I do is I'm going to go into my user class. So let's get rid of this, get rid of this, and come here. And under this, I'm going to create a static method. Oops. And this is going to be called def validate user. Now, this is going to take in data, right? Because we need to send our form data for it to validate. And so it's going to take in something. Now we call it data because, you know, it's called data everywhere else. But if you called it, you know, info or something, you just want to make sure that it matches up there. Cool. Now, what this does is we're going to run this before we run any sort of class methods, before we query any database. So what we're wanting to check is this information true? Is it good? Is it valid? Right? And so the way we do that is we, again, call the static method. And we're going to have a piece of code here called isValid. Now, this is going to be something that we just keep with us, and we're going to set it equal to true, right? We're going to say we believe that people have good intentions, but really it's just, okay, we're going to set it equal to true. And then we're going to set all of our conditions. We set all of our conditions. So if we look at my form, let's go to my one user form. I've got a couple bits of information, right? I have a first name, a last name, an email, and a password. Cool. What we're going to do is I can check that information from my request.form. I can have those values, right? So here, what this is going to do is we're going to pass in my form data. And then it can say if the length of data, and that's just my request.form, with a key of first name. And so what's going to happen is it's going to take the value that I put in as first name here, and this is going to check the length. And we're going to say if that is less than 2, then we say is valid equals false, right? Saying it's not valid, you need to have more than 2 letters in your name. This could be anything. This could be, if we wanted to say 19, which would be crazy, right? If it's less than 19. But we could do anything. But this is really just creating a condition and saying, hey, in order for my data to be valid, it needs to be blank. And in this case, the length, or however many characters are in that answer, needs to be more than 2. If it's not, so if it is less than 2, then we're going to say that that's not valid, right? Is valid equals false. And it prevents us, and it's just our warning of saying, hey, the data is not good. So that way we can say, okay, well, we can go back to my user and say, hey, I need you to change things up. And we can do this for all of them. Same thing with last name. Same thing with email, right? We could say if email is less than 5 characters, which we'll talk about email maybe at the end of this class. Email's sort of a weird one, but 5's kind of a little, but you need like a .com, .org. So I guess that actually makes sense. And then if password is less than 8. So right now we're going to say that it's got to be less, or it's got to be greater than 8 characters. We could do less than or equal to. We could do greater than, if the password's greater than 8, then it's too big of an issue. We can do any sort of comparison there. Again, we're just checking the data and saying, does it match, right? Is there a first name? Is it empty? Is it more than 2 characters? Is the password more than 8 characters? And if it's not, then we have an issue. I'm gonna say less than or equal to, because I use password as my password for whenever I'm telling stuff in class. And so I don't want to change it. So we're gonna do less than or equal to 8. Now, what this is going to do is, again, if everything is true, let's say it's greater than 2, so it does not enter this if, it remains true. It's greater than 2, everything, it never enters into any of these, so everything is good data, then we're returning is valid, right? If everything is good, it's going to return true. And if it's not, then it's going to be false. Cool. So look at the platform, it's showing the exact same thing. Don't worry about Flash yet, but we will end up using that as well. Cool. Now, what we can do is actually go make sure our code is running this before we save. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to my controller. And this is going to be the one that we know creates a user. So here we've got this user.save. I've got my data, right? I've got that. So what I can do is before I even check to save, I can say if not, meaning that this is the opposite of what its value is, then I want to redirect back to user form. So let's pause there. What this not does is it says if not this information, so the opposite, then I return and redirect. So this is going to be true. Not makes it false. So this is basically a way of saying if this equals false. It's just a faster way of doing it. Oops. Sorry, I'm on my Windows, so I forget sometimes I can't do my sweet Mac things. But it's basically saying if this equals false, then redirect. That's doing the same thing. Doing the same thing, right? It's just saying if not, so if it's false, or I could say if equals false. The platform shows it this way, so I will just say not. Again, this is true. So it's saying if not true, just false. So if false, then I want to return redirect, right? And so what this does is this saying if it's false, then I want you to return redirect back to user form. So we're not going to get to this user.save. This is where my query hits. We're sending it back to the form, right? And saying, hey, there's some errors there. There's an issue. This information is not correct. If it is true, remember, anytime a function gets a return, it immediately stops running. So it's not going to run the rest. It's going to stop running and it's going to redirect back to the form. If it doesn't enter this, which means that it's true, then we go and we save our data and then we redirect back as normal. So I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions on what we just did?
Hey, well, I have a question.
Go ahead, Graylin.
When you were in your user, I think the model, yeah, the static method you said, is there a way to know which order things are gonna run, or does it automatically know?
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
So for this example, you were talking about not pinging the database. You've got the static method at the bottom. Is it still gonna? I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, great question.
With all this in here, how do I know which is gonna run in what order?
Yeah, so remember, this right here is sort of the lifeblood, or it's controlling my backend, my server, this controller here. We know that it's running .create because we went to user create, because that's what my form did, right? So my form sends it there. So if we come to my user form, it sends it to user/create. So when we click that submit button, it's going to automatically go to my controller. And it's going to find that route that matches, and it's going to run this function. Now, when we identify or we create these methods of class, it's the same way that, when we write a function in Python, we can write a really beautiful function and we run and nothing happens. What has to happen in order for it to actually do whatever the function is? What do we have to do?
Invoke it.
Yeah, exactly. We have to invoke it, right? And so the same thing works with this class. Unless I invoke this or invoke any of these methods, they just sit there and they don't run.
Oh, okay. It doesn't like check through each one.
Nope, it doesn't check through each one. So here, when I say if not user.validate user, this is me invoking this function. Now you're right. If I had this higher, then this would save first and then validate, right? Which is not what we want to do because it's called first. But in this case, on line 28, because we're running this invokes it. So it goes here and it finds the method that matches that, which in this case is here. So invokes it. So it doesn't even remember or look at any of these, only the function that I invoked, only the function that I called.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
You literally just answered the question I was about to have about the order of this page. If the validate user, like if it matters where it goes, and it has to be just after user create.
So it has to be before, right? Because before we run any sort of ping on my database, before we have any sort of any usage of that, we want to make sure it's valid. And so remember, when we're running this function, anytime a function sees a return, it immediately exits, right? And so the reason we do validate, and you could even take in, you could run it here and say, if not user.validate request.form return redirect before you even create even data, right? This could be the first thing you do. Hey, before you even do anything in this function, validate it, because if it's not valid, remember, if not true, so if it's false, then go ahead and redirect before you do anything. This would also be just fine. In fact, we'll save it that way just to kind of prove a point. Again, once it gets this redirect, it's going to send us back to /user form, which is this, and it's going to render this template. So it's not even going to create data, and it's not going to ping our database at all. So if you have some sort of validations, oftentimes you want to use that validation kind of at the highest point or the earliest point, because you want to prevent your computer from or your program from doing any extra calculations that you don't need to do, taking up space or taking up time.
Got it. Thank you.
Cool. Does everybody understand this not portion? Just want to make sure that, because it's like a weird kind of heady thing. Just want to make sure if there's any issues there.
Yep, I'm all good.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So what we can do is let's go ahead and test it. So let me go to my terminal. Can't remember where you pull it up down here.
It's at the top next to run.
Well, that gets me my new terminal, but I thought there was a button that I could already have one running. Oh, there we go. See, that's what I was trying to click, but I was wanting to get there. Okay, so it's running. So if I refresh, I come to new user and I type, I should immediately redirect back here. Okay. So we can't see that anything happened, but I'm going to do something just to show. I'm going to say print. This just to show that it's working. We are in the model validation is valid. Perfect. That's great. So let's run it again. Cool. So we redirected back and we see we are in the model and the validation is false, meaning that we did not hit that correctly, right? Cool. So now let's go. Create a user. Let's see. I
don't think your email was fired.
I would think that WK@C. Try that. Okay. So not sure where that was an issue, and that's where we're going to get here in a bit, but we can see, okay, now we have inserted into users. And if I say show all users, I now get Kate Cow. Cool. And my little family. Great. But we could see that that wasn't super helpful, right? It redirected back. We know how it works, but if I come here and I do create user and it redirects, it doesn't really tell me anything, right? It doesn't, and that's not a great experience for my user. So that's where we can introduce this idea of a flash message. And that's just a tool that we can use that you can sort of think about it like session, but it just is a piece of information that remains temporary and available for one redirect. So it's not going to be persistent throughout, but for one specific redirect, remember how data, once you redirect it, it's gone. That's why we have to do some stuff to it. Flash is basically its life is one additional redirect. And it's a way that we can show some sort of values or give something there that that allows us to tell them like, hey, name needs to be 8 characters or whatever their issue is, then we can handle that way. So all we do is on our model, on our model, we go from Flask, import Flash. So my model, say from Flask, import Flash. Perfect. Import Flash. Perfect. Cool. And then now what we can do is we can actually create a Flash message for each issue. So we know that if the name is less than 2 characters, I can then create a Flash message. First name must be at least 2 characters. And I can go through and do that for all of them. Last name, email, and password. Perfect. Cool. So now I'm actually giving some information to my users. If it doesn't work, then they can know and they can have that. So we have that and it's creating these Flash messages. but we need to be able to show that information, right? So we can get the flash messages, and there's some documentation here to do that, but we can just copy and paste honestly here. And so go into my HTML, oops, user form HTML, and up here, I can paste this code. Looks awful. And we'll go through. Let's check to see if it worked for a second or first. And then we'll go from there. I don't believe it has to, oops, it doesn't have to be, I'm just kind of OCD-ish. But we could have ran it at the normal and it would have been just fine. Okay. Cool. So our debugger's running. We refresh this page. Now, if I come here, we get this first name must be at least 2 characters. Last name must be at least 2 characters. Email must be at least 5 characters. Password. Now, if I say Will and I create user, you can see that we no longer get the first name because that passed, right? That's not being added in. And so if I say Will Cal, now we should just have the email and password. Cool. Email, password. It's not adding into my database at all, right? We're still getting this. We're in the model. Its validation is false. We're not getting any of this. This always tells me running query that we're hitting our database. We didn't do that. The only time we did that is when we actually created a new user. But these flash messages now allow us to let our users know, hey, you know what? Yeah, like this is the issue, or your name must be 5 characters, your password must be, a sacrifice of your firstborn, just typical stuff when we're dealing with passwords, because they're always crazy. It'll ask you your social security. Passwords are nuts. But yeah. Any questions on the flash messages? Let's actually walk through the code there. So what this is doing is this saying with messages, get flashed messages. So this is us running, we're declaring a variable called messages. And we're saying, hey, its value is, and I want to go and get those flash messages if there were any that were created, right? And we say, hey, if there are messages, then I want to iterate through them and let's just show the message. Then we end our for loop, end our if statement, and end our with. So with is declaring a new variable called messages that only lives here. And its value is get flashed messages, which is coming from Flask. We're saying, hey, if you get anything back, then it enters into that if statement and we say for message and messages. So we're going to iterate through, even if there's one. We'll show that message that we created. These are custom messages from us. We end our for loop, end our if statement, and end our sort of session of, it's not session, but end having messages here. And we show them. Cool. Are there any questions on what we just did?
You will.
Yeah, go ahead, Tintin.
What if we want to display the message under the form, under the input box?
Oh yeah, great question. So then what we could do is we could iterate through, and there's some stuff that we'll have to do in order to, let's just see. I want to, let's go to get flashed messages. Let's go to that. Because there's something tricky you've got to, not tricky, but you have to go through and basically attach that. Let me look into it, and then maybe on Wednesday we can walk in, because you have to attach basically and tell it and say, okay, if this input name matches this, then we go through. with categories, true.
Would that be the same way we would get it to appear within the text field?
Do you mean in the actual, like, here?
Yeah, in the box. Mhm.
Yeah. Same way you would just put, then you'd put your value is, whatever message or whatever that is. So we would iterate through and we would say for message and messages. That's the message, but I want to see, I believe that there's an attribute of each message. Let me look into it and then I will, hit you guys back on Wednesday with that. Cause there's something weird and kind of quirky with the Flask stuff where you have to, I can't remember if it's a category. Let's just try this. We got some extra time. Oh yeah, we're cruising on time. So let's try this. Okay. And then it says if messages or category message and messages. It's also possible to provide categories when flashing a message. Default category is message. Oh, no, that's not what we're looking for. Yeah, I'll have to look into this. Because as you can see, the documentation is not super duper great. But there is something that we can do that will allow us to connect the two together. So we'll talk about that on. Oh, wait a second. No. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. Yeah. Great question though. For the you will have to do this for your belt, but this is all that's expected of you. It's not expected that you're going to go and do the actual name. Let's try if I can just do a P tag of messages. See if that breaks it all. Oops. See if that breaks it. Okay. Yeah, so it just says message first name, message last name. So I think what we'd have to do, because that's what the messages are, we would have to set up in here. We could set up a category. Let's try it. We're doing this on the fly, friends, because we also kind of covered everything that we needed to cover today. Cool. Let's go to my user form. And let's get rid of this. And we're going to start new. See if our friend Chat GPT can help you. Nope, that is still doing it. So let's see. We can get the category. So what we could do, this is sort of a bootstrappy way, is we could say, basically do this for each value. So we added a little, let's kind of go back to what was happening there. Here, we added in a second value here, right? So we added in our flash message. We add in actual message itself. And the second part is a category. And so we found that by looking at flashing with categories. So here, right, that's their message. And then here's the category. And so what we could do is we could say, this is allowing us to filter our messages and say, okay, if it's that, then I want to deal with that. So what I could say is with errors, get flash messages, category filter, first name. So let's see. And then we're saying if errors, div class alert, error, and if. Okay, so this did it. So let's command Z. Oops. Oh no, that is what I wanted. Dang it. There we go. So command control X. And we'll do it for here. Do it for here. And we'll do it for password and we'll see if this works. And then we'll walk through it. Let's see if this works. Okay. Let's get rid of this. Okay. Now we refresh. Let's try it again. Okay. We sort of got it. We sort of got it. We could do a couple different things where we could just from a formatting perspective, like say form group MB3 on that div. And then let's say MB3. This is giving some margin on the bottom, so it kind of separates that out. I think it goes up to 5, and then we'll do that. And then let's refresh. Okay. So it sort of works. Where we have it to where now it's associated to the first name, last name, email, password. And let's kind of walk through what happened. Now it's div classes alert and alert danger. And so I would bet that alert in Bootstrap is variance docs. Yeah, so here's what we have. It's just this alert. I don't love this. We could do yeah, so we could do any of this. This is just but this is working. We're just adding these classes of alerts. That's why it looks kind of gross. Anyways, let's kind of walk through what's happening. We found it to where we just had these messages, right? And it was, we were just kind of iterating through. Well, we also found out because we just followed the documentation from the platform, this one right here, this is here. We kind of looked at the documentation and noticed, hey, this means you can add a category to each flash message, right? And we see that by flashing with categories. So we see that we could add in our message when we're creating our flash. We could also add in a category. And so what we thought was, let's go ahead and go to my user. And with each flash, we'll give the flash message and then we'll give a category. And the category is going to be associated to whatever the input is. So last name, first name, email, password. Cool. So what we said was, all right, let's go ahead and get flashed messages. And so we have to run this for each because they're each different categories, right? Now I probably could do like a for loop that had maybe a list of all these. That's just kind of more information than we need. But what this is doing is this is getting all the flash categories and it's filtering. In this one, it's saying, hey, only give me the category or the messages with the category of first name. So in this case, we know it's first name. And I'm saying if one exists, then let's create this div class alert danger. Alert danger is what makes it red and alert is what makes it that big box. And then let's iterate through all of those messages. Now we know that it's only going to be one because we've set it up, but it iterates through and it shows the actual error. So the error message ends that for loop, ends the if statement, ends the with statement. And then we move on and then, then we have our first name and then we move on to the next one, right? Then we say, okay, last name. If it has last name, and then we get all of our errors. So this is us just iterating through and getting each error by a category. And this category is associated to whatever the input is. Does that make sense? Kind of just did that on the fly, but.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, if you wanted to, yeah, I think that's probably plenty for this. We could change that if we didn't want it to be like an alert. We could just create a div. Let's just try one of them. That might make a little bit more sense, right? So maybe we get rid of all of the classes for my div. Oops. Cool. So now if I refresh, we get last name, first name, email. Cool. Any other questions on this specifically? Any questions on anything in general? That's kind of all I had for us to kind of walk through in class today. Again, we're going to be talking about on next week, we're going to be talking about securing our passwords and doing bcrypt. So we're going to be looking at kind of hashing passwords there. But what your assignment this week is you to build a CRUD application. And then you can change the order and log in order, but you need validations. Actually, yeah, let's go back here. Now that we've created this validate user, we have the ability to use that wherever we want, right? And so we are doing it when we're creating a user, but we want to make sure that they can't go in and edit our user and still have bad data, right? And so what we can do is we can say the same thing. So if not, and then we can say user validate user request.form. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it. And this is going to redirect us back to, and then maybe it's not our user form. Let's see. What gets us to our, user form, our edit form. To this. User ID, ent ID, edit. So let's copy that. Cool. But that's not what I want, is it? Well, this is our get one, sorry. That is where we want to take it. But this is just getting it. Our update, sorry, I was on the wrong one. Our update is what we want to make sure that we change. Right? Where we're saying, okay, we can go to this edit page. Then if they send data, we're going to validate it first. And if that data is not valid, let's just send them back to this edit.html. We can do the same thing. We can have the same sort of setup with messages or flash messages. And then that's preventing us from even creating data or updating if the data is bad. So we can go into my edit. One user. I click edit. I don't know that we even have that, do we? Oh no, it's just this edit.html. But we don't have an edit.html. Well, let's go fix that. Okay. We'll create a new one. Okay. Now I'm going to cheat. Just going to be honest. And this is basically all the same things, right? So I could just come here, say this. But instead of going to users/create, what are we going to do? We have my user. Cool. So we have that information that we can kind of give it a look at. But where I'm wanting to send it is user/int ID/update. So, let's go into that. User/ we have user.id/ and then instead of create, it's update. I have access to my user. So I can, if I wanted to, have like a, let's do like a place, let's do a value equals user.first name. Let's test. See if it's double. Cool. So let's just even test it out before I go build it out. Let's test it. Thing is running. Show all users. Let's go to edit. And here we have Will, right? And so hint, hint, this might be something that is a more advanced thing that you could do on your exam. Is it might say, hey, whenever you edit, what if you pre-populate all those fields? And so what we can do is all we do there is on my HTML, we say value of whatever the user or whatever the information we want, and it'll pre-populate those fields. And it's kind of a better user experience. So I could say value equals user dot last name. Do value equals user dot email. And then I'm going to probably just leave password blank because that makes a little bit more sense. Fresh. Now, if I say edit for Charlie, we see that it goes Charlie, Calhoun, C at C. And if we don't touch it, it's going to take in that value and it'll automatically pass that in. If we do touch it, then it'll take on whatever that new value is. But I could just say, you know, what if I just wanted this and then nothing here and I do create user. Oh, int ID. Ah. So saying that this did not work. So we have /user ID /update. Password must be at least 8 characters. So let's go here. User /int ID /update methods post. Anybody see my error? User dot first name.
Is it the ginger brackets instead of the greater than less than symbols around user ID? Or are those supposed to be there to import the variable value?
It's the variable. So it'd be in the same way that I've called it here. I would think that I'm just calling it there. Let's check.
Did we create the class, update class?
Oh yeah, no, select post users to update. So you're right, that is working. So then it is something in here. So update. And then let's go to user. I have update. Users at first name, last name, email, password, where ID equals ID. ID, first name, last name, email, password. Ah, here's the error, is because I wrote this in as that was just plain text, right? And so because I did int and I copied that, I wrote it as plain text. So it was looking for something like that. That wasn't, you know, this is saying, hey, I'm expecting a number. That was actually the string of int colon. So now if we come back here and we go back and we refresh, we say edit Charlie, and I don't pass a password. We still get an error.
That should be user ID, right?
This?
Yeah.
No, it should be coming in from up there.
Is it because we didn't put
But
in a
yeah,
password perhaps and it's running the validator?
Well, it
that's the
is,
route.
and then it's running here, right?
That's the route, I guess we're using it.
And we're coming back, and that's when we're getting, no. So it's running that. It's not liking this right here. So I need an F string. Silly. It's because I was doing a curly bracket ID. And so what happened is it ran the validator, right? Because I even see this message here. And it's not great, right? Because I didn't put a password. When I went to redirect, it was trying to redirect, but I had this curly bracket ID and it didn't know because I didn't have the F for my F string. So let's try it again. Back, refresh, out of here. Refresh. Let's go to Marley, create user. Cool. So now it works, right? I did not get, I didn't do anything in my class, right? Gave me a false. It comes back. The only time it does is it selects because it sends us back to this value here and I'm getting my user. But I also get my password must be at least 8 characters. So now I've got validations of my email and my creation. Cool. So now my data is prevented from being bad data, basically. Are there any questions on validations? They're pretty simple, you know, but you can see little things like this can kind of get you messed up. But any questions on anything we did with our flash messages? Any questions? You do have to have sessions set up. So if you haven't gone into your Dunder NetPy and set up like your app secret key, then it's not going to work. So make sure session is set up for you. Just really the secret key. But are there any questions on what we've done? Kobe, which problem did you have yesterday? I see that was 2 minutes ago, but was it the F string? Yeah. Yeah, it can get you. It can get you good. But we got it all fixed. And we sort of went off the cuff and just figured out how to put it all on one or for each one. So any other questions, friends?
Hey, Will,
Yeah.
if you need like different validation for user and movie, do we need like separate user validation?
Yep. So so if we need it for movie, we'll have a movie validator and we will have that. So we'll need to make sure that they give us a title, a genre, and a director, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we would create a static method for that. And then we'll say def validate movie. And then we'll do the same thing, but we need to bring in Flash. So from Flask, import Flash. But it'll be the same thing. And I could, if I wanted to say title, give it a category of genre, and then a category of director, and then do the same thing. Yep, it'll be the exact same way. Just like that. We haven't done an edit movie yet, but it'll be the same thing. Any other questions, my friends? Great question. Okay. Well, what we'll do on Thursday is, sorry, I keep saying Thursday. On Wednesday, what we'll do is I will show you guys how we can kind of build this out even more, and we'll do pattern validation. So we'll do that with our email. We'll do that with our password potentially. And then what we'll do is we'll sort of build this out even more just to get some extra practice so that we'll make sure that we have CRUD for both movies and for users. And then that'll sort of set us up for then our login and registration. And then we're kind of had a full functioning project. So we'll build that out on Wednesday. So we'll do pattern validation and then we'll just continue building this. So build it together. Other than that, that's all I have for you guys. I hope you have a wonderful night and we will see you on Wednesday.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Bye,
Will.
everybody.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, guys.